Okay.
All right. Okay.
So, so just kind of the structure of our talk today is talking about kind of generally what intercat conflict is, you know, why it's so prevalent, and you know how you can recognize signs because it's not always so obvious. And then talk about the three main reasons that I see that cats have conflicts with one another. And then hopefully we'll get to the end and I'll talk to you about some case studies that I think are pretty interesting. So, you know, cats fight a lot. Like I was already talking to you about how many cases I see.
Oh, from Texas? Oh my God.
I can't hear very well.
Oh, you can't?
Well, I'm hearing someone in the background or something.
Oh yeah.
I think it's somebody's not muted and we can hear their background.
You guys can mute yourselves, and then when you want to ask me a question, you can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Okay. Do you guys? Nobody's here with me, so I'm going to take my mask off. Actually, is that okay, Evelyn?
Oh my God, I can see your face. It's indecent. Like ankles in the 1800s.
No, it's like I'm so used to wearing my mask, but I was watching a video of last week's talk, and I was like, I don't know if people can really hear me with my mask on. So, but nobody's here. Usually there are people with me, but everybody's in a different part of the shelter now. So I was talking about how commonly we see intercat conflict cases. And recently I posted a link to a Finnish study, I think it was from the University of Helsinki, where they were having caregivers take a survey, and it was a pretty good sized population. And the caregivers reported that 41% of their house cats showed some form of intercat aggression. I thought that was very interesting. You know, and it kind of goes right along with this, the fact that we see so many intercat conflict cases here, because, you know, cats are like, you can't just have one. Like, what are those potato chips? You can't just have one of them. But what are they?
Lays.
Lays.
It just shows how much Lays I eat. But anyway, yeah, so people want more cats. They have one cat and they just want another cat. And if 41% of cats are sometimes uncomfortable with other cats, you're going to see conflicts there. The other thing is that people really underestimate the needs of cats. They, you know, growing up, cats to me were always the pet that you had if you wanted a dog, but you didn't have any space. So you had your apartment, or maybe you worked, you know, a full-time job and you couldn't take a dog out for whatever reason. So you would get a cat because cats just had less in the ways of needs. You know, they didn't need so much from us. They just could be there and you could feed them and give them a litter box and they'd be okay. But nowadays, there is a lot more information about what cats do need. There are a lot more studies about what cats need to feel fulfilled. So, for example, ASPCA Pro this year came out with a recommendation that cats, at least at shelters in their free roam room, should have 18 square feet of space, which is a lot for us, but it's not, you know, for the shelter. It doesn't sound like a lot in an apartment situation, but at the same time, the amount of space increases exponentially as you add more cats. So 2 cats, according to the ASPCA, don't need 36, but they need much more space than that as you keep adding cats. Interestingly enough, there have been a few studies about the lives of feral cats or free roaming domesticated cats. And they found that the home range of these cats was 4.9 acres. So that's almost 5 acres of space. That's a lot of space. And that's just their core, you know, area where they live. And I mean, so it kind of, to me, it was very mind-blowing when I heard about this study a year or two ago, because, just that idea that cats are just, your apartment pet and they're conveniently sized. But despite the small size of the cat, their home range is really large. And compared to, say, dogs, like people think, oh, dogs are, they're so energetic and they're larger and I have to take them out for walks and I have to, do all these activities with them. But what do you guess is the, the home range for free roaming domesticated dogs? Anybody have a guess?
I don't know.
No, just guess.
6 acres?
6 acres?
No.
8 acres?
Bruno says 8 acres is wrong too.
2 acres.
Yeah, it's actually less. That's closer, Rhodey. So the estimates are as small as less than 1 acre to 4.6 acres. So that's less space. So when you think about it in those terms, the cats that we have in our apartments really need more space than the dogs that we take out for our long hikes and so on. So you can imagine that there would be a lot of territorial conflict with cats being naturally territorial animals when you bring more than one in a small space. And this is one of the reasons why next week for our behavior video, I want to watch Dr. Haug's video about the social development in cats, because she does talk about this need that we often overlook. So I was also talking about the fact that cats are, the type of animal that they kind of take care of themselves. That's what people think. And so people don't provide them with a lot of enrichment. They don't interact one-on-one with their cats every day. So that's just, it sounds silly, and I don't mean just sitting around and petting them, but I mean doing activities that stimulate them mentally and physically, and develop a relationship, a working relationship with your cat. So just sitting around on your couch and petting your cat, it's not going to be very fulfilling on more than one dimension. Also, people want cats to do things that are not natural, like sharing their resources. So they'll, want to feed all their cats together. Everybody, hopefully they're not sharing one bowl, but they're all eating at the same spot, or they have just like one bowl of water that they want all the cats to share, or they have, maybe they have 3 cats and they have 3 litter boxes, but all of the litter boxes are in the bathroom, right? So that's really just one litter box. Another reason that people have such problems with inter-cat conflict is that they often don't realize that there is a conflict for a long time until the cats are just fighting and drawing blood and ripping their fur out. So, it could be years that one of the cat just kind of spends most of their time in another room, kind of away from everyone else, or, or they're chewing their hair, or, they're occasionally having some inappropriate elimination, but it's not a big enough problem for people to report it, and so they don't really look into it, and it turns out to be a problem with the other cat in the house. Another reason is that so I write here that the behavioral plasticity of cats is often underestimated. Like, people just don't realize that cats' behavior can be changed and that cats can be trained. I know I did a talk a little while ago where I talked about the fact that cats can be trained and behavior modification with cats is possible. For some reason, cat caregivers are also more likely to say that cats will work it out on their own. So, they bring a new cat and they just like, well, just let them, work it out on their own. They'll settle their own differences, or they'll like kind of work out their dominance hierarchy thing. Because for some reason, just like with dogs, dominance is kind of that go-to reason for all problem behaviors, but obviously that's not the case. Okay, so I hope you guys have your stories about intercat issues that you can share with us today, and maybe some of this is kind of is resonating with you. Okay, so, you know, there are some times where it's very obvious that cats are overtly fighting. You know, they might, some people have a bit of trouble telling the difference between play and fight. So here are just some things that you can use to tell the difference. So when there is some actual fighting and not play, you'll be able to see that the cat's body posture is really stiff, and they might be making some obviously hostile noises like hissing and growling, which is not really so common when cats are just playing. You'll also see that the cats aren't really taking turns being the, you know, aggressor in the fight. So if it were a play fight, there would be a lot of taking turns being on top. But in a contentious situation, usually you have one cat who's you know, the offensive cat, and one cat is just trying to get away, trying to hide, or like rolling over defensively. Some other less you know, less obvious signs of intercat conflict are using or going to the bathroom outside of the litter box. You can have cats that are not eating or drinking. They're just kind of, because the other cat is guarding their food or water station, so they might stay away. They might only eat in a specific place. Recently, I saw that one of Kirsten's cats started eating under the bed, and I was just thinking to myself, what happened there? That's the first thing I was thinking is, was there some kind of issue with the other cats in her house? You can also notice some aggression towards humans in your home, or maybe your cat is normally an affectionate cat who likes to spend time with you, and suddenly they won't want to be near you, or suddenly they'll start to give you a dirty look when you try to pet them. That can be a sign of intercat conflict. Okay, so let's talk about the three main types of intercat conflict that I see, and you guys might see other types too. I'm happy to hear about them. So the number one most common type of intercat conflict is happens when the person has not provided enough resources. So, you know, like I said, people really want their cats to just eat at the same time, and they'll provide them with a bowl of food that they just kind of leave out all day long, and the cats will, you know, guard the location where the food is. Or the same thing goes with litter boxes. Like I said before, they won't leave enough litter boxes out, or they mistake number of actual litter boxes for litter box spaces. So what we're talking about is different spaces where cats can eliminate. So you want, you know, more than just one room. You'll want to litter box spaced around your home. Now, in the cases where you only have one space, you would see that cats are going to be eliminating in other places because the other cat's going to be guarding. How many of you heard of Pandora syndrome in cats? Anybody know?
No.
Beth is saying something.
I said, actually, no, I have not.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying something else. But anyway, okay. So Pandora syndrome is another name for FIC, or feline interstitial cystitis. And people used to treat it just with, you know, they would give the cat a urinalysis, and they would put them on special food. And they thought it was purely like a bladder infection. But nowadays they're recognizing Pandora syndrome as more like kind of a waxing, waning, you know, urinary tract issue, but also can be combined with the gastrointestinal issue. So they might have some soft stools, or they might not want to eat. So, and generally speaking, this is something that can happen in cats that are sensitive and easily stressed. Some other typical characteristics are male cats are more prone to Pandora syndrome, but not necessarily, but I think that people find it to be more common in male cats, and also cats who only eat dry food, and which is interesting to me because not to do with intercat relations, but I've noticed that cats who prefer mostly dry food are prone to stress issues. Why could that be? So each cat at home should have at least one food and water station, and not necessarily in the same place. So this could be spread around. In fact, I recommend that people feed cats in different places, like each individual cat gets their food in different places so that it encourages them to forage for their food. So that's additional enrichment. And oh wait, I can skip to the next bit. So it's so funny, like that, here are the recommendations. So sounds so silly and cheeky to say provide adequate resources. Well, what do you mean by adequate resources? So I was just saying they should have, at least one food and water station per cat, but it's nicer to have more than that. It's also good to feed them meals as opposed to just kind of leaving their food out all day. So when I was starting out working in sheltering, that was the most common schedule that people had with their cats. They just kind of put food out once a day, and maybe in the morning they would refresh the food. They would always be very confused why the cat would be begging for food when there was still some stale food left over in the bowl. So just providing the regular meal time too acts as a adequate resource, because they feel like they're getting food more regularly. They feel like they're getting more food instead of that food that kind of stays out all day. Some other resources, litter boxes, of course. What's the recommended number of litter boxes?
One per cat?
One more for every cat. So if you have 3 cats, you should have 4, is what I've heard.
Yeah.
Per floor.
And on every level of houses.
Yes, exactly. Celine has it. Yes, on every floor. 1 per cat plus one per floor.
Oh, wow.
That's the ideal. And so cats can deal with less than that. And I often see cases where the cats are fine. And there are a lot of factors that determine how much cats need in terms of resources. And we won't really go into that. We'll probably learn more if you next week watch the Dr. Haug video with us. But there's a lot that goes into it. But some cats, sometimes you could have 4 cats and they all are able to use one litter box just fine because they're in a cohesive social group so they can share their resources better. Or sometimes you have 4 cats and each one of them is in a different social group so they can kind of coexist or not. But they're not able to share their resources like they would if they were one close, comfortable social group. So, the 1 per cat plus 1 per floor is the ideal. And then, but many cats can cope just fine with less than that. Let's see, some other resources, or you guys know a lot about cats. What other resources can you think of?
Time with their caregiver, that is, what?
Yes. Yeah, one-on-one.
Interactive, but also safe.
Yeah, one-on-one, safe, interactive time with their caregivers. Yeah, so, a lot of people have multiple cats, but they don't realize that means that you have to spend time with each one of those cats one-on-one, because cats can be super competitive over social interaction with people. And I've actually seen cases where cats sent the other cat to the hospital because every time the dad came home, they would both kind of vie for his attention. And so at the times when the dad would come home, that's when the cats would fight. Actually, this was a cat from the shelter. Do you guys remember Dixie from the senior room at that time? He was this black cat, and he was so sweet, but he wouldn't let any other cats come up to you in the room. Then he got adopted, and he had a friend cat that lived with him. And that behavior continued on to his adoptive situation. He's like a big cat too, big and jealous. So yeah, time with the person. What other resources can you think of?
Places where they like to lay. So
yeah,
like
priority
yeah, where they sleep.
Yeah, so not all territory is equal. So when we say that cats are territorial, we're talking about the fact that they value specific kinds of territories. So, you know, some cats who are maybe a little bit shy and, you know, they're not, they're worried about conflict with other cats. They might stay low, or they might stay in boxes, and, you know, but many cats, especially status-oriented cats, will go for the highest spot, or the spot with the best view, or the spot with the sunbeams coming through where they can sun themselves. You know, so that always has to take into account, that always has to be taken into account. So not just the space. So, you know, how many times have you gone to a caregiver's house and they have like a huge house, but they just have nothing there? Like they don't want any cat furniture, right? They don't want a cat house. So they've got all this like minimalist, it's very stylish, very nice. But for the cats, there's not a lot of territory. So when you put that one chair out, guess what? The cats are going to want to get on that chair, especially the higher status cats vying for that spot. So the other thing that people don't often consider is that when you think about territory, you're also thinking about routes to resources. So avenues to get from one place to another. So in every multi-cat home, especially when you have more than one social group, you should have more than one avenue to get from, you know, from their resting place to the litter box, to the feeding area, to the water spot. You know, so there has to be more than one way to get to all of those places. And there shouldn't be any dead ends. So, you know, any place where cats might hang out, there should be, you know, an entrance and an exit, because you don't want cats to ever feel cornered. So, you know, it makes cats seem so, so high maintenance. But these are things that cats would want. These are things that they would choose, because very often if you have multiple social groups in your house, they're not going to want to run into each other and have to kind of get around each other, you know, when they're walking behind the couch. So that's why I recommend lots of vertical space, lots of walkways for cats along the walls, tunnels. My sister has had years of intercat conflict in her home, and her house is just tunnels, all tunnels. Behind the couch, behind her chairs. She's got one behind her bookcase. So she, you know, so it's nice to have different routes for the cats. Okay, so any questions about resources?
When you said those tree houses or cat houses, you should have at least one per cat, or?
It's a good idea to have more than one vertical area. Like the cats don't really, a lot of cats like cat trees, but they don't really, I don't think, know the difference between a cat tree and, like, you know, the top of your refrigerator. That was always a very popular place in my house. Or, you know, if they just need different different vertical spaces where they can have a vantage point where they can see out the window maybe. So there should be more than one of those. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to a different type of aggression. Another really common kind of aggression is redirected aggression. And this is a very serious kind of aggression. This is a type of aggression that you wouldn't want to let go on. I mean, you wouldn't want to let any kinds of these conflicts go on, but when I see redirected cases, these are cases that can cause serious harm to other cats. And people are often unable to recognize redirected aggression because it often happens between two cats who are, prior to the onset of the conflict, seemed to get along really well together. They hung out a lot together. They were very close to each other. And that's the reason the closeness of the cats is something that contributes to the redirected aggression. The reason is that it happens whenever, so I put the picture here of the cats in the window because the most common situation is where the cats are sitting next to each other in the window and the one cat sees something outside. It could be something scary. It could be something frustrating, like, you know, they wanted to get after a bird, or it's something exciting, and they're frustrated because they can't get to it or they can't get away from it. So the first thing they do is turn around and go after the first person that's nearby. And usually that's their best kitty friend sitting next to him in the window. And the problem is that we don't always see what the cat's seeing out the window. And redirected aggression can be triggered by things that we can't sense, that the cat can sense, like pain, or they could have smelled something that would trigger them. So, it's hard to tell often what the cause of the redirected aggression is. And like I said, the aggression itself is often quite severe and can result in injuries for whatever reason. I'm not 100% sure why. So the tricky part of redirected aggression is that the effects can last for a really long time. So it's not just right at that moment or any time the cat sees other cats outside, although that could be the case. It could be that your cat sees one scary cat outside and then forever after is attacking their friend because they start associating their friend with the other cat. So, and this is something that can just happen for months after the exposure to the primary trigger. So you can see it's very tricky. It's a very tricky problem. And funny thing is that this is a behavior that is observed in the wild and is considered, species appropriate behavior. And a bunch of different species show this behavior. I'm not really sure what the function is. Some ethologists, they postulate that the reason that animals do this behavior is to make their associates flee when they see a potential threat. So they kind of like bite them to make them go away. But, who really knows? Anyone have any ideas about that? I just know that, when in the bird community, birds do this quite a bit, captive birds. And what they tell you to say, the reason is that they're trying to make their mate flee. But I don't know, I'm kind of skeptical about that. Okay, so here are some recommendations. The first thing is, of course, you're gonna figure out the primary trigger for the redirected aggression, because this behavior is secondary, right? It really doesn't have too much to do with the victim cat. It really is something else. In any situation where you see, where you're able to witness the aggression as it happens, if you can, because often it's a very dangerous situation, if you can get the cat into a calm, quiet place that is kind of dark, dimly lit area, and keep them there after they're triggered so that they can calm down. And you're gonna keep that cat in that area for several days. You're gonna keep them separate from the victim cat. Or, this happens to people too. So if the victim happens to be a human, you would keep, if possible, keep that other cat away, because what that does is not only gives the cat a chance to calm down and settle down, but it also reduces the likelihood that they'll associate that stressful incident with the cat friend or the human that they've assaulted. Okay, so once they've calmed down and you're able to start working on, and you're able to recognize what the trigger was, you're going to manage the exposure to that trigger. There's lots of different ways of doing that. I want to talk about the main situation that I see is that cats see interloper cats outside. So this happens a lot for my friends who have cats and also feed the feral cats out of their homes. Your cat's looking outside and they see stranger cats, and that's where the redirected aggression happens. So, you know, if possible, I like to encourage people to feed away from their home, away from where the cats can see what's going on. And don't forget too that if your cat has out time, which, you know, we do recommend that cats have safe, supervised outside time with maybe some cat fencing around your yard, your cat can also be triggered by the smells of feral cats that aren't there at the time. So, you know, try to feed your feral cats away from your house if possible. And I also recommend if you're not purposefully encouraging cats to come near you, you can discourage their presence by putting scent aversives outside, or, you know, some kind of, you know, like you can have your water sprinklers turn on when cats come onto your property. And let's see. Oh, you can also put up some visual barriers on your windows. So a lot of the times we recommend those adhesive, like frosting. I don't really know what you call it, but you can get it at any like Home Depot or Lowe's, any kind of home improvement store. It's something that can stick to your window and it lets the light in, but the cats can't really see what's going on outside. Now, once you are starting to introduce the cats again, you're going to use a, to be safe, you're going to use this appropriate introduction protocol, just like you would if you had new cats or cats that had a fight. It's nice to have a brief reintroduction to make sure that there's no negative association with the other cat. I know it's a lot of work, but you know, what do they say about prevention? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, something like that. Yeah, so just, you know, this is just a, you know, a couple weeks of introduction, and just to make sure, just because this problem can be so serious. Okay, and then you're going to do counter conditioning and desensitization sessions with your cat, with the aggressor and the trigger. So if your cat is triggered by other cats, you can, you know, have them by the window and have them learn to associate the exposure to other cats with something really nice. And very often the cats that experience redirected aggression would benefit with medication. They would benefit from medication. So a visit to the vet isn't out of the question. Anybody have any experience with redirected aggression? I mean, we see it at the shelter sometimes, but it's not quite the same. It's like when you're, I don't know, when you're carrying a cat around the shelter, not in the carrier, sometimes that cat will see other cats and they'll turn on you, but it's not quite the same. It's not this kind of lasting issue like it would be at home. Okay. So, and to me, this is, so like this fear-related or territorial conflict, I had trouble kind of naming this. A lot of people like to say that when you bring a new cat into your home that your cat is being territorial, but I have real trouble, you know, discounting the possibility that that behavior could be fear-related, because we don't socialize our cats very much. And so they're not used to new cats, and they're not used to new cats coming into their space. So, you know, even though we like to think that our cat's territorial, there's no reason why it couldn't be a fear situation. So this is the situation that we see a lot at the shelter because we're having people bring new cats into their home. So this is what you would see when the cats fight, when a new cat comes into the household. But also, if you just move house, or if one of the cat goes to the vet or both of them goes to the vet and they come back and they kind of smell different. So they're, to essentially a new cat to the other cat. That's happened to me before. And when you're blending households, so people move in together, and for some reason, when people move in, each person has like 5 cats and a dog, and they move in together, and then you have to work on introducing the animals. You can also usually tell that this, you can differentiate the fear-related aggression, because these cats, you'll see signs of stress as soon as the other cat comes into the room. And they may not have had any history of prosocial behavior. So they don't nose touch, they don't hang out together, they don't do any parallel activities. These cats just cannot be around each other. And if they can be around each other, then, the cats cannot stand to see another cat moving near them, especially if they're in a priority access resting place. So, I think this is kind of competing with the lack of resources, reason for conflict for me. I see this all the time just because we have so many adopters. Okay, so here are the general recommendations. The first thing is prevention. Prevention is so important in this situation because you don't want the cats to have conflicts at all, because every time cats have conflicts, they're more likely to experience conflict in the future. You may have heard me say before that cats just don't forgive. They don't try to make up after they fight the way that humans do or dogs do, but instead that negative association stays with them for a very long time. And the more that they have conflicts, the more likely they'll have conflict in the future. And so you want to make sure that they don't have that first conflict. So when you're adopting another cat, or whenever I talk to adopters and I think that they're going to want a friend for their cat, I always tell them to try to pick a cat.
What's happening to Bruno?
I know, Bruno, I know. Oh, he was doing so good. Try to pick a cat who has a history. Bruno, what's going on? Try to pick a cat who has a history of getting along with other cats. So, if you don't know, then it's, remember what I said about like 41% of cats having a history of some kind of other cat issue. So it's just better to, the risk is so much lower when you pick a cat that's already been good with other cats. Okay, so you've picked your cat. Oh, and by the way, if you don't know, we have our cat pals cats at the shelter. So cats that we have seen have positive interactions with a variety of other cats, we'll designate them cat pals. So if you speak to adopters and they're wanting another cat, you can just kind of push them in the direction of a cat pal. And I know that the adoptions department has a list of the cat pals that we have right now, and that'll save us in the behavior department a lot of work later on. Because the worst thing for me is when I'm consulting with people about inter-cat conflict and I find out that they've adopted a cat that has just never gotten along with other cats. And I'm just like, why? That was not a good idea. So, okay, so once you've picked your cat, then you can prepare a space away, a private space away from the other cat and quiet, so it's easy for them to feel comfortable in that space. Also with all their resources that they need, like the litter box and a nice place to rest, an elevated space, a hiding space for them. I think I said food and water. And you should keep that cat separate in a level of intensity where they're always under threshold. So, a lot of people think that just keeping the door closed is enough, but many cats will still growl at each other underneath the door. So if you're seeing that, then you can increase their distance, so to speak, by putting a towel underneath the door so that they can't barely smell each other. You really want to avoid any sign of stress associated with the new addition to the family. You can swap scents. So this just means that you you can have some bedding that's been with this cat, the new cat and the resident cat, and swap those smells so that they can get used to how each other smells. Or you can swap their toys so that they can smell each other on the toys. And then, you know, it's a classic recommendation to feed the cats on either side of the door. But a lot of people just kind of put the food just right next to the door, which can be too intense for a lot of cats. So you can try feeding the cats away from the other side of the door, because cats can smell each other from pretty far away. So, you know, not right up next to the door, but, you know, a good 6 feet away on either side of the door. And make sure that the cats are eating, because if they're not eating, then that means that they're over threshold, right? So then you can move the food further away or feed them food that's a little bit higher value. So let's say you've gone from, you've taken your cat home and you've had a week where they're separated, they're showing no signs of stress, they're able to eat their food on either side of the door, and you're able to move the food slowly closer and closer till finally the food is on either side of the door, and they're, you know, eating heartily. Everybody is, you know, eating, drinking, resting. Everyone's using the litter box appropriately. Everyone is, you know, interested in interacting with you, the human, as much as they normally would, soliciting affection, right? Like if your cat suddenly doesn't feel like getting affection from you, then that's a sign of stress there. We'll have some cats that just love human affection, but you put them in a room with another cat and no, suddenly they're swatting at you, biting you, you know, staying away from you, acting afraid of you. And that has to do with the exposure to the other cats. So, you know, you're only going to move ahead and introduce visual contact or move ahead in the protocol when the cat is doing all those things normally, right? So people often feel like rushing things. You know, they just kind of have the timeline. They're like 1 week, okay, and no matter what the cat is doing, they're going to move to the next step. No, you're going to let the cat dictate to you. Both of the cats dictate to you how fast or slow you should move. Okay, so that's the ideal world. And if you want to know more in detail, the ideal way of introducing cats, Cat versus Cat by Pam Johnson Bennett does have a chapter about introduction or reintroduction. And I recommend that's probably one of the most recommended books for me, is the Cat versus Cat book by Pam Johnson Bennett. It's got a chapter about the introduction and reintroduction. Okay. So let's say you've already had conflict. So of course you're going to go back and separate the cats. You know, you've probably often heard me say cortisol vacation. If you spend enough time with me, you'll hear me say cortisol vacation. A cortisol vacation just means that you're separating the animal from a potential trigger, because every time they're triggered, then, you know, they're much more likely to be triggered. It takes less for the animal to be triggered. So that goes for dogs too. So if you want to have the most chance of success in introducing the cats, you'll want to take away any of that stress so that they're down at their baseline level that they were at before the other cat came. So how long does that take? You know, some people just say a couple weeks. I say 4 to 6 weeks. I say quite a bit longer than that. Just because I want to be safe. And during that cortisol vacation, you're going to train some coping behaviors. So coping behaviors are something that we do all the time with the dogs at the shelter. You know, you can do the same exact thing with cats. They're generally eye contact to help with, look at that later. Touch to help get your cat's attention away from the other cat. And then also going to a mat to help them be able to move away from the other cat. there's tons of things that you can do. Like, you know, at the shelter now, the pattern games are all the rage. You can do that with cats. I think Beth's doing that with some cats.
I sure am.
Make sure that you're using reinforcers that are very high value and ones that they don't get. So, you know, if your cats get their temptations every day and they're looking forward to their temptations every day, don't use those as a reinforcer. It's better to use something novel and something that they never otherwise get. And just like when I was saying that you're going to let the cat's threshold dictate your level that you're working, your level of exposure that you're working at, it's the same thing when you do counter condition them and desensitize them to the other cat. So you're gonna, you know, stay far away, and level of intensity isn't just proximity, it's also determined by arousal level. So you're gonna try to keep them calm and you're gonna try to keep them far. You can also reduce the visual exposure by putting a baby gate in between, like a screen. You can put some kind of translucent barrier for them. They'll know that the other cat's there, but they're just less exposed. It's kind of like using a calming cap on a dog. And also, eventually, as you get closer, when the other cats get closer to each other, you can consider using double barriers. So you would put one barrier, so like one baby gate, and or two baby gates, and then another set of baby gates on another side of a doorway. So you have two, and that just keeps the cats from having direct contact with each other. Lately, what we've been doing with a lot of our intercat conflict cases, as the cats get closer, is we loan them a Tokyo. So a Tokyo is this little, it's like a little kennel with different levels on it, and you can fit the cat's litter box in there. Like, we actually keep cats in Tokyo sometimes as they're boarding at the shelter. So the Tokyo, but you're not going to keep the cat in the Tokyo. You're actually going to have the Tokyo be the double barrier. So you can put the Tokyo in the doorway, and then cats can't get anywhere near touching each other. So I think that was PC's idea. So it was a really cool idea. Okay, so I think that's it for this type of conflict. Anybody have any questions about it? I know it seems really simple, but we're going to talk about some case studies where we've used these. So let's talk about the case study. I'm going to tell you about it, and then you're going to tell me what was happening. Hopefully I didn't give too many clues. Okay, so this is one of my favorite cases that I've ever seen in my entire career. This is Luke, Leia, and Chewie. So Chewie was an adult male neutered cat that lived in an apartment with two caregivers. It was a one-bedroom apartment, so it was a bit small. And Luke lived with these folks until he was, so from kittenhood until he was about 2 years old. And they decided to get some more cats because you can't have just one. And so they adopted Luke. And Luke was 5 months old. And yeah, I mean, he was a high energy, also neutered male. He was adopted from here. And then they adopted Leia, and Leia was 7 months old, and they adopted them like months apart. It was pretty close together. And so then they started seeing some problems. The problems were that they weren't sure if Luke was fighting with Leia or playing rough. And Leia was hiding and not socially interested in them at all. Oh, and I don't know if you see the pictures, I don't know if you can see wait. I was trying to show you which one's which. This one is Luke, and that one's Leia. She's pretty, and such a pretty fluffy cat. And that one's Chewie. I don't have any good pictures. He was a giant Maine Cooney looking cat. And then Luke was fighting with Chewie, and they were fighting when nobody was around, and often when their caregiver, like the husband was often home alone with them. And when the husband was in the shower, they would start fighting. And then also Chewie was biting the male caregiver too. And also they felt like Chewie was mad at the male caregiver and peeing out of spite whenever they, like I remember one situation where there was a fight and the male caregiver was in the shower. He heard the ruckus. He comes out and he starts scolding them. And he scruffed Chewie. And then he, you know, when Chewie went away, Chewie went and peed. So they felt like he was revenge peeing on the husband. And the caregivers wrote to us desperately. They had tried everything humanly possible. And the nice thing was that they did take Luke, because they felt like Luke was the main culprit. They took him to the vet to rule out any medical issues. So we had here some inappropriate elimination. Sometimes they didn't know who had peed anywhere, and there was some fighting or potential rough play. And yeah, there was a whole bunch of stuff going on there. You guys can ask me questions because I'm sure I'm leaving stuff out. Well, I am leaving a whole bunch of stuff out. So we went to their house. And I took the tour because I always do that. It's so helpful when you see what's going on in the person's house, because it sounds kind of mysterious at first. Of course, you know, part of it is, you know, the male caregiver probably shouldn't be, you know, shouting and grabbing the cats by the scruff. That's probably one thing. But also I noticed that they were all sharing a litter box. They had 2 litter boxes in the bathroom, and they all ate out of the same dish and the water bowl. And it was a cluttered home, but there wasn't a lot of, you know, like the cats they didn't have any cat furniture items. So yeah. So that was basically what was going on over there. So what would you do, or what would you ask?
I mean, yeah, the very first thing obviously would be to, if they can afford the space or find the space, get additional litter boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And food dishes. And food dishes.
Yeah, so they needed more food areas for the cats, and they needed some you know, more litter box spaces. And that was really hard won. I had to, they were very creative about it though, eventually, when I was insistent on it. So I also found, I forgot to mention too, that they were only scooping the litter boxes every other day. So, you know, so what's our recommended, what do we recommend for caregivers for, you know, ideal litter box routine?
I do mine twice a day, but
yeah, I have 3 cats and I scoop twice a day.
Yeah, twice a day. Yep, twice a day scooping,
With a full
and
cleaning once a week.
yep, and cleaning it out completely
Yeah.
once a week. Yep, you're dumping everything out and washing out the litter box. Yep, so I recommended that, and the increase in the, you know, different resources. I recommended some cat walkways and more vertical space. When somebody donated a cat tree, we let them take that home. Tunnels and, you know, different ways to get from one place to another, because obviously these cats were not one cohesive social group. So there were multiple social groups going on in that house. So they needed more than one way to get from one place to another. And they needed, you know, enough feeding spots, enough litter boxes. And we also recommended lots of enrichment because the cats were young. The 2, it had only been maybe a month and a half. Oh, no, these guys had been living with them for at least a year. So, but they were still young, you know, they were less than 2 years old. And so we recommended, so the AAFP, the American Association of Feline Practitioners guidelines, I think are great to recommend to caregivers to follow. And they have a really neat pamphlet that's on our Facebook group. But, you know, they recommend multiple feedings a day, more than twice a day, and feeding once at night, and feeding through foraging toys. So, you know, we recommended that, as well as some scent enrichment. So you all know that I really like the Pet Remedy calming spray. So they were using that, and catnip. They were also bringing in clippings from their yard, from their grass. They put out some bird feeders, and they also started training. They started training all the cats using our training videos. So just very basic clicker training for the cats, and they were making sure to have one-on-one time for each cat. So I also coached them on how to read the cats to know what they were feeling, because before that they were basically going by the sounds that the cats were making. So they, you know, they felt like when the cats were vocalizing, they were unhappy, but otherwise they didn't really know how to tell. And one of the reasons that Chewie was biting the male caregiver was he was, you know, the male caregiver was unable to tell when he was not receptive to being picked up. And, you know, I mean, also the other reason was that he was shouting and scruffing him roughly. So he was coached on how to respond calmly when the cats were doing things that he didn't like. And doing the training really helped them have something else to do, right? If the cat's doing something you don't like, then you can ask them to touch, or you can ask them to go to their spot, instead of just saying no and shouting at them and making them pee. And then, like I said, I coached them on ideal litter box care. So, I mean, this was all just in one day. I think I just saw them one time, and then after that, I was following up with them. So here's a picture of DeAndrea when we went there that one time, and she was training the cats to sit. And but you could see that they were able to kind of be near each other, which is also a sign that it wasn't just that there were new cats around, right? It wasn't just the novelty of the cats, or, you know, that kind of territoriality that I was talking about earlier. They were able to be near each other, but they weren't able to share resources. So here's what she wrote. I'm gonna have to try to move your faces away.
Oh, we're still on screen.
Yeah, or maybe somebody else can read it, so I don't have to move your faces away. Maybe Rhodey, can you read? Can you read the thing? Because
Yes. Okay. 6 weeks later, since you and your fantastic team have come over, things have changed dramatically. We're no longer experience aggression behavior issues. We have started playing with Luke and Chewie a few times a day, separately and together. We do notice that Chewie still gets jealous if we're paying attention to Luke and not him. So right after we pay attention to Luke, we immediately either go play with Chewie or pick him up and love on him. He's become even more affectionate since your visit and spends a long time in either my or my husband's lap. We're also scooping out the litter boxes more frequently and using unscented litter, and just using baking soda instead of trying to cover it up with perfumed litter. We uncovered the litter boxes, but left one of the lids out in the living room so they can hide and play with it. We also got more scratching posts and have cleared off the top of our shelving units in the living room so that they have somewhere to perch.
Okay, thank you, Rhodey.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, we checked in on them 5 months later, and we got another update. You guys mind reading it, just so I don't have to like figure out how to move your faces?
Yeah, I'll read it. 5 months later, I wanted to give you another little update. We've really been focusing on reading their body language and non-meowed cues. We've learned so much. Now Chewie and Luke let us know when they want to play. Chewie has become more affectionate and will put his little paw on Patrick's leg when he wants to be near him, but not be on him. Leia has become even more of a snuggle bug. We try to play with her a little bit, but she prefers to sit by the window. Every now and again, she'll paw at a toy, but it's few and far between. We do catch her cleaning Luke every now and again, too. Luke is still the little bundle of energy that he has always been. We have to play with him the most so that he doesn't annoy the crap out of his sister. He and Chewie will play together, but he will let Chewie know when he's done now. And no more bad incidents between them since my last email. Anyway, I wanted to thank you again for all your help and suggestions. We learned so much from you and your team. We now have a very healthy relationship with all of our babies, and we understand them so much better.
That's so sweet. I can't get enough of that. And it was just, they were having so many issues, and it was just, you know, just a few recommendations that changed their situation. So just quickly, this is another case study, Nikki and Bali, and both of them FFL alumni. Bali was a young adult female, and she was adopted as a tiny kitten, and she did not have any experience with other cats since going to her home. And this is a picture of her with a little heart. So you can see how little she was when she went to her adoptive home. She was a very intense cat, like very easily, highly aroused. And she was very opinionated, and she didn't always like to be touched, or if she got too excited when she was played with, she would bite her people. Okay, so then they decided that they wanted a friend for Bali, and they adopted Nikki, an adult. She was, you know, a little bit older than Bali, and she had a history of being friendly towards other cats. So they figured that that she would have the best chance of getting along with Bali. And these adopters were great. So before they even contacted me, they'd been trying for 6 weeks to introduce the cats and, you know, in the, you know, kind of by the book. So they, you know, read cat versus cat. They kept them separate. They were feeding them on either side of the door. They were swapping scents, and they were even kind of exposing them through a baby gate and playing with them and petting them and giving them treats, or they were trying to, but the cats were fighting on either side of the baby gate. And also Bali was redirecting on her people and biting them, and, you know, she was drawing blood from them. Boy, that cat could bite. Okay, so this was one of my favorite cases too, because the folks were so great at following instructions, and you know, it's still ongoing. I'm still talking to them, and it's been like 2 years. It's been 2 years. But so here's what happened. In the first in our first meeting, I told them to you know, continue keeping the cats separate. And I also figured out that the reason why the cats were having trouble with their desensitization and counter conditioning was that Bali just could not be in the same area with Nikki. Like, they were in separate rooms. So Nikki was staying in the bedroom, and the bedroom had a bathroom that was next to a living room. So these rooms were all next to each other, so you could see from the living room to the bedroom where Nikki was staying. And if you look in this kind of screenshot from the video, you can see that Bali is in this living room, and then next to the living room was a dining room. So, you know, this was just kind of this long expanse of space. And in order to be able to be under threshold, Bali had to be all the way like on the other side of the dining room. So there was the bedroom, the bathroom, the living room, and the dining room. And she had to be all the way on the far side of the dining room. And also, we modified their training so that they would use higher value treats. And we coached them on some coping behaviors like eye contact, touch, and go to mat and sit. And they were keeping a log of every single time the cats were exposed to each other, even if it was by accident. But they were so good. That rarely happened in all the years, in these 2 years that we've been coaching them. They've been great about managing cats. And if you do behavior consults, you know that that's rare. So, okay, so here is a video of Alessandra doing some training with Bali, and she's doing touch. So in the beginning, they were still separate, and she was just practicing touch with her. I love their videos. They're so cute. Richard?
Oh.
So cute. Okay. Okay. So they also eventually, once Bali was really good at her coping behaviors, we had them do look at that, but way, 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 like I was telling you, way far away from each other. And that was the only distance where Bali would take treats when Nikki was around. So here is an example of that. I think in this video, they must be quite close. See how close they are? So she stopped using the clicker. She's using yes, but they're Italian, so she says yes. So cute. And I mean, you know, it's not perfect. I would have marked and rewarded a little bit faster, and it's typical for people to wait to get that level 3. And luckily, Bali is offering the level 3. Look at that. So I think this is just splendid. Really, this is as good as it gets, really, with adopters. Okay, and okay, and I just wanted to show you the double gate setup. So they had one gate on one side of the bathroom and another gate on the other side. And then eventually we set up the Tokyo, which was like maybe 3 feet wide in that doorway, which I don't have a picture of, unfortunately. So you can see that. So eventually they were able to expose the cats and give them a little bit more autonomy. So they weren't just training the whole time, but they were just kind of taking time in between. And they had their, 2 barriers set up so the cats couldn't get to each other. And eventually, so the Tokyo was allowing them more space together. And then they had a couple weeks with the Tokyo, and then they just had one gate. And now there are, so here's some, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Wait. Oh, it's Suzanne.
Yeah.
All right, hold on. Let me see if I can get back to what I was doing. And now they, I think I have to press backwards. No.
There's a YouTube channel, behavior team channel.
That's not what I wanted to do. Maybe I wanted this. I can't like click on this stuff over here. Let's see. I'm sorry. Let's see. I think it's one of these underneath the thing on the top. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop sharing and then I'm going to share again. Okay. So anyway, they went from the 2 gates and one on either side of the bathroom. Then they moved to the Tokyo, which was just a couple of feet wide. Oh, it's not there. And then they had 1 gate, and now what they're doing is they basically let the cats out. They have the cats out together all the time when they're awake, and at night they keep them separate. So, you know, whenever they can't, when they can't directly supervise them, they're keeping them separate. But you know, I'm going to just check on them. I want to see some video, and then I'm going to okay them to let the cats be together all the time. So here are some photos of their progress. So you can see, can you see it, or do I have to do this thing again? I think I have to.
We can't see it.
Okay, thank you.
You have to share it again.
Okay, 1 second. Okay. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so here are some pictures of the cat's progress. So you can see they were on either side of the room. And here you can see, I don't know if you can see on the picture on the left, there's Nikki on that little chair, and Bali is right next to her on the mat. And this is what, you know, no, they're not doing the exercises anymore. This is just kind of letting them interact autonomously. And then the one in the middle has Nikki lying down on the dresser, and Bali is sitting and looking out the window. Hopefully she doesn't see anything scary out there. And then here they are on the bed together. So I would say that is a success.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, it's so funny because in the beginning I was like, this is not going to work. I went to this case with Adelie the first time, and as we left their apartment, I was like, oh, it's not going to work. I don't know why they want to keep Nikki. Bali doesn't want to have a friend. She doesn't, you know, this is as bad as it could be. She cannot even be, you know, a few rooms away from Nikki without showing signs of stress. I was feeling very negatively about it. But it just goes to show that if you do things by the book and you're, you know, keeping them under threshold, and every single interaction is a positive one, that just about any 2 cats can live together. But it takes very special adopters. So I'm very proud of them. I think they're a wonderful case study. So basically that's all I have for you today. I could talk for ages. You know, like I said, we see a lot of these cases, and I can talk to you all day and night about these intercat conflict cases. And, you know, and if you have stories, I want you to tell them to me too. You know, it's my obsession. So any questions or anything you want to contribute?
Is this being recorded, this presentation, where we could watch it again, or just curious?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, I want to say it is, and at least Lynn is recording it, but I saw that it said recording, so.
Oh, okay. Good. Good. Wow.
Yeah, it says recording still. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts? No?
Cats are a lot different than dogs.
Are they though? I don't know. I mean, I think cats are a lot. I feel like people want to believe that, but there are more similarities than differences, especially when you start training other types of animals. Like, you know, I always say that, you know, horses and cats and dogs are very similar. Horses and rabbits are very similar, but, you know, cats and dogs are very different from horses and rabbits. And parrots. Parrots are really different. So I think that just puts things in perspective the more animals you get to know. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that cats and dogs are all too different. You can see most of these problems with dogs too. You know, you can, you know, some dogs take a little bit more time to get to know one another. And, you know, in a way, dogs have this advantage because when they're puppies, we just work so hard to expose them to lots of different dogs and different situations. But the cats, they just kind of stay, you know, they're just in one place for months at a time. And then we expect them to be able to deal with new experiences. And it's hard. If you did the same thing to a dog, if you kept a dog inside and made them, you know, use a litter box and never had other dogs around, they'd probably be pretty weird about having a new dog in the house too.
Yeah, like Tallulah, I mean, she was from where she stayed in that house for 5 years.
Or not, it was,
Wasn't it Tallulah?
yeah, she spent many months of her formative.
Oh, someone told me 5 years. Oh, okay.
Oh no,
Yes.
she's young, but she was there from puppyhood to adolescenthood, young adulthood there. So yeah, she is a bit weird. True.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, so next week we're going to be watching Dr. Haug's talk on feline social development. I really love it. I hope you guys can watch it along with us.
Is this every Wednesday at 2 p.m.?
This is every Wednesday. You don't.
Oh, I didn't know until I've got to get on Facebook. I don't do Facebook, but okay, yeah.
All right.
Every Wednesday, okay.
Next Wednesday. Bye.
Oh, is that it?
Thanks,
Okay.
Melissa.
Bye. Is Suzanne still here? Oh,
Thank you, Melissa.
Bye.